The coffee maker gurgled at 2:47 a.m., same as every night for the past 3 weeks. Insomnia had become my closest companion since Rory started her extended business meetings with Evan Kellar, her design firm partner. I sat in our kitchen, my kitchen now, I supposed, listening to the house settle around me like an old man's bones. Rory stumbled through the front door, her heels clicking against the hardwood with the precision of a metronome. She'd perfected that walk over 15 years of marriage, but tonight, something was different. The rhythm was off, like a song played in the wrong key. "Working late again?" I called from the kitchen, not bothering to hide the sarcasm dripping from my voice. She appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair slightly mussed, lipstick gone, wearing that expensive black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Client presentation ran long," she said, avoiding my eyes as she kicked off her heels. "You know how demanding the Morrison account can be." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Must be exhausting, all those late-night spreadsheets and design reviews. Rory shot me a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Just observing that dedication like yours deserves recognition." I stood up, walking closer to her. "Speaking of which, that's an interesting cologne you're wearing. Very masculine. New fragrance from the Morrison client?" Her face flushed, and she turned away quickly. "I need a shower." As she brushed past me, I caught sight of something that made my stomach twist into a knot. A small, dark mark on her neck, just below her ear. Not a bruise exactly, but the kind of mark that comes from someone's mouth pressed against skin. "Rory," I said quietly. She stopped but didn't turn around. "Your phone's been buzzing on the counter for the past hour. Evan's been texting. Something about forgetting your earrings at his place." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. When she finally turned around, her mask had slipped completely. The woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and steal fries from my plate, was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized. "It's not what you think," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I picked up her phone, the screen still glowing with notifications. She hadn't changed her passcode, still our wedding anniversary. How's that for irony? The messages were all there. Weeks of them. Months, maybe. Evan's contact photo smiled back at me, that smug grin I'd learned to tolerate at company parties and dinner invitations. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Usual place. Tanner's working late again. Perfect timing. Your husband called the office looking for you. Told him you were in meetings." My hands remained steady as I scrolled through the evidence of my marriage's demise. 15 years reduced to text messages and emoji hearts. "How long?" I asked, setting the phone down gently. Rory's chin lifted defiantly. "Does it matter? Humor me." 6 months, maybe 7. I nodded, processing this information with the same methodical approach I used to troubleshoot computer networks. Problem identified. Now, for the solution. "Are you going to leave me for him?" She hesitated, and in that pause, I found my answer. "Probably," she said finally. "Evan and I, we have a connection. We understand each other's ambitions. And I don't? You fix computers, Tanner. You're good at it, but it's not exactly building an empire." I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. "No, I suppose it's not." Rory looked confused by my reaction. She'd probably expected tears, pleading, maybe some dramatic gesture. Instead, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. "Well," I said, finishing my coffee, "I guess we'll need to discuss the details. Division of assets, the house, all that fun legal stuff. You're taking this better than I expected." "What did you expect? That I'd fall apart? Beg you to stay?" I shrugged. "We're adults, Rory. These things happen." She studied my face, searching for cracks in my composure. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm furious," I said calmly. "But anger without purpose is just noise. I prefer to channel mine into something more productive. That night, after Rory had retreated to the guest bedroom, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Computer monitors, networking equipment, and filing cabinets filled with 15 years of meticulous record-keeping. You see, there's something Rory never understood about fixing computers. It's not just about identifying problems, it's about understanding systems, finding vulnerabilities, and knowing exactly which wire to pull to make everything collapse. I opened my laptop and began to work. The Last Stop Tavern hadn't changed in 20 years, which was exactly why I chose it for my meeting with Donnie McKenna. Dark wood, dim lighting, and the kind of clientele that minded their own business. Donnie was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and picking at a basket of wings. "You look like hell," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. "Charming as always." I signaled the bartender for a beer. "Thanks for meeting me." Donnie McKenna had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both skinny kids with big dreams and small wallets. Now he owned McKenna's Auto Repair, the most trusted garage in town, and had developed the kind of practical wisdom that comes from 30 years of fixing other people's problems. "So, what's this about?" he asked, wiping sauce from his fingers. "Your text was pretty cryptic." "Rory's having an affair." Donnie's expression didn't change, but he set down his beer with deliberate care. "You sure?" "Caught her coming home at 3 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne. Found the text messages." She admitted it. "Damn, brother. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I need your help with something." Donnie leaned back in the booth, studying my face. "What kind of help?" "The legal kind, and maybe some of that creative problem-solving you're famous for." Over the next hour, I laid out my situation in detail. Rory's affair with Evan Kellar, her plans to leave me, the way she dismissed my career and my worth with casual cruelty. "Here's what I know about divorce law in this state," I continued, pulling out a folder thick with printed pages. "Community property, asset division, spousal support calculations." Donnie flipped through the documents, his eyebrows rising. "Where'd you learn all this?" "Same place I learned network security and database management. The internet's a wonderful thing when you know how to use it." "You're planning to represent yourself?" "Can't afford not to. Rory's already talking about hiring Davidson, Pierce & Associates. That's a $500 an hour firm. And you think you can go up against professional lawyers?" I smiled, and something in my expression made Donnie sit back. "Donnie, what do I do for a living?" "Fix computers." "More specifically?" He thought for a moment. "Network security, database recovery, system analysis?" "Right. I find problems in complex systems and figure out how to fix them. Sometimes that means rebuilding from scratch. Sometimes it means finding the one corrupted file that's bringing everything down." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "The legal system is just another network, with its own protocols and vulnerabilities. And Rory? She's about to discover that underestimating the IT guy is a very expensive mistake." Donnie grinned. "What do you need?" "Transportation assistance. Rory's car has been spending a lot of time in Evan's driveway lately. I think it needs a change of scenery." "When?" "Tomorrow night. They have their weekly business dinner at Romano's, then head back to his condo. Should give us a 3-hour window." "Us?" "I'll need a witness. Someone respectable with a clean record and a legitimate business." Donnie raised his beer in a mock toast. "To creative problem-solving." The next evening, I parked my pickup truck 3 blocks from Romano's and walked to the corner where I could see the restaurant's valet stand. Rory's silver BMW sat gleaming under the streetlights, a symbol of everything she valued: expensive, flashy, and financed with money we couldn't really afford. My phone buzzed with a text from Donnie. "In position. Tow truck ready." I watched through the restaurant's windows as Rory and Evan shared what looked like an intimate dinner. She was wearing the red dress I'd complimented her on just last week, back when I still thought we were working through a rough patch, rather than witnessing the end of everything. Evan reached across the table to take her hand, and she smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. For a moment, I felt something crack inside my chest. Then I remembered her words from the night before. "You fix computers, Tanner. It's not exactly building an empire." I pulled out my phone and sent Donnie the signal. Green light. 20 minutes later, Rory's BMW was loaded onto McKenna's auto repair tow truck, heading for Donnie's impound lot. Perfectly legal. I was still her husband, the car was in both our names, and I had every right to have it towed for maintenance. But that was just the opening move. While Donnie handled the car, I made my way to Evan's condo complex. The Riverside Towers, 30 floors of glass and steel, designed to impress people who needed to be impressed. Evan lived on the 15th floor in a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river. I'd been there exactly once, for a housewarming party 2 years ago. Rory had insisted we attend, and I'd spent the evening listening to Evan pontificate about market trends and design philosophy, while his guests nodded appreciatively. The parking garage was my destination tonight. Evan's pride and joy sat in space. 47, a black BMW M5 that cost more than most people made in a year. He'd spent 20 minutes at that party explaining its features to anyone who'd listen. I knelt beside the rear tire, unscrewing the valve cap with steady fingers. The small metal valve stem tool Donnie had given me fit perfectly. A quarter turn counterclockwise, and air began hissing out slowly. Not fast enough to be immediately noticeable, but enough to leave him stranded by morning. 3 more tires, same treatment. By the time I was finished, Evan's status symbol would be sitting on 4 flats, and the slow leak would make it look like vandalism rather than sabotage. I was back in my truck and halfway home when my phone rang. Rory's number. "Tanner, my car's gone. Someone stole it from the restaurant." "That's terrible," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Did you call the police?" "The valet said a tow truck took it, but I didn't call for a tow." "Weird. Maybe there was some kind of mix-up? You should check with your insurance company." "Can you come pick me up?" I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. "I'm actually in bed already. Maybe Evan could give you a ride." A pause. "His car won't start." "Rough night." "Well, there's always Uber." "Tanner." "I'll see you in the morning, Rory. We can sort out the car situation then." I hung up and drove home, humming along to the radio. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had been a good start. The next morning brought exactly the chaos I'd anticipated. Rory's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Insurance companies, towing services, and increasingly frantic calls to Evan about his mysteriously deflated tires. I made coffee and toast, maintaining the picture of domestic normalcy, while my wife paced the kitchen in her bathrobe, her voice rising with each conversation. "What do you mean you can't get a service truck until this afternoon?" She snapped into her phone. "This is an emergency." "Car trouble?" I asked innocently, buttering my toast. "Someone vandalized Evan's BMW, all 4 tires, and my car is still missing." "Sounds like you made some enemies." She shot me a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just an observation. Coffee's fresh if you want some." Rory's phone buzzed with another call. This time it was Maggie Chen, her best friend and office gossip coordinator. I could hear Maggie's excited chatter from across the kitchen. "Slow down," Rory said. "What about the Morrison account?" More excited chatter. "He said what? When?" I pretended to read the morning paper while listening to Rory's side of the conversation. Maggie was clearly delivering some kind of office drama, and from Rory's increasingly pale complexion, it wasn't good news. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Rory said finally. "Don't let anyone else talk to Morrison until I get there." She hung up and stared at her phone. "Problem at work?" I asked. "The Morrison client called this morning. Someone told him that Evan and I were having personal relationship issues that might affect the project timeline. That's unfortunate. Any idea who might have said something like that?" Rory's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you? I looked up from my paper with genuine surprise. Me? How would I know anything about your office politics? Because you're being awfully calm about all this. What would you prefer? Should I be running around screaming about your car, having a breakdown about Evan's tire problems? I folded the paper neatly. I'm not the one having an affair, Rory. I'm just trying to get through each day without any more surprises. She studied my face for a long moment, searching for cracks in my composure. Finding none, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm calling a cab. We'll figure out the car situation later. After she left, I allowed myself a small smile. The Morrison account represented 30% of Kellar and Associates' annual revenue. If that client started having doubts about the firm's stability, it would create exactly the kind of pressure I needed. Of course, I hadn't actually called Morrison. I'd simply sent an anonymous email to 3 of the biggest gossips in Rory's office, mentioning that I'd overheard some concerning personal drama between the firm's partners. Office gossip networks are remarkably efficient, much like computer networks, actually. Information spreads along predictable pathways, and if you understand the topology, you can control the flow. My phone rang. Donnie. Phase 1 complete, he said. The BMW's been towed to my lot. Owner's coming by this afternoon to pick it up. Perfect. Any problems with the other thing? Nope. Your wife's car is safe and sound. When do you want me to find it? Give it until this evening. Let her spend the day dealing with insurance paperwork and police reports. Then you can call with the good news that it turned up in your lot. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I considered the question. I'm finding satisfaction in systematic problem solving, yes. That's a fancy way of saying you're enjoying it. Maybe a little. That afternoon, I drove to Kellar and Associates to deliver lunch to my stressed wife. The design firm occupied the top 2 floors of a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting designed to project creative authenticity. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. Oh, Mr. Jossman. Rory mentioned you might stop by. She's in the conference room with Mr. Kellar, trying to salvage the Morrison situation. I heard there were some problems. Nothing serious, I hope? Ashley glanced around conspiratorially. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but there have been rumors about... She lowered her voice. Personal issues between the partners. You know how clients get when they think there might be drama affecting their projects. Personal issues? You didn't hear this from me, but Maggie mentioned that Rory and Mr. Kellar have been spending a lot of time together outside the office. Late meetings, business dinners, that sort of thing. Some people are wondering if it's purely professional. I arranged my expression into one of concerned confusion. That does sound concerning. I mean, Rory's mentioned working closely with Evan on various accounts, but I assumed it was all business. I'm sure it is, Ashley said quickly. It's just office gossip. You know how people talk. Unfortunately, I do. Well, I'll just leave this lunch for Rory and head back to work. As I walked toward the elevator, I could hear raised voices from the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Rory and Evan in heated discussion with an older man in an expensive suit, Morrison, presumably. The conversation didn't look like it was going well. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Morrison. Need to discuss your wife's professional conduct. Call me. I stared at the message, genuinely surprised. I hadn't expected Morrison to contact me directly. I waited until I was back in my truck before returning the call. Mr. Morrison, this is Tanner Jossman. I got your message. Mr. Jossman, thank you for calling. I'm going to be direct with you because I respect straight talk. Are you aware of the nature of your wife's relationship with her business partner? The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure I understand. My company has invested significant resources in this project. When I start hearing rumors about personal drama between the principals, it makes me nervous. especially when that drama might affect their ability to deliver professional results. What kind of rumors? The kind that suggest your wife and Mr. Kellar are more than business partners. Look, I don't care what people do in their personal lives, but I do care when it affects my project. I took a deep breath. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your directness. The truth is, Rory and I are having some marital difficulties. I recently discovered that she's been having an affair with Evan Kellar. Silence on the other end of the line. I see, Morrison said finally. I'm sorry to hear that. So am I. But I want you to know that whatever personal issues we're dealing with, I would never want them to affect your business relationship with the firm. I appreciate that, Mr. Jossman. Unfortunately, this puts me in a difficult position. If there's going to be ongoing drama between the partners, I need to consider whether this is the right firm for my project. I understand completely. For what it's worth, I think Rory is very good at her job. But you're right to be concerned about the stability of the partnership. After I hung up, I sat in my truck for several minutes, processing what had just happened. I hadn't planned for Morrison to contact me directly, but his call had opened up new possibilities. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rory. We need to talk, tonight. This situation is getting out of hand. I smiled and started the engine. Yes, it certainly was. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Rory was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled, and she was wearing the blue dress I'd always said was my favorite. The whole scene was carefully orchestrated, a performance designed to manipulate. Sit down, she said, pouring wine into both glasses. Please. I remained standing. I'm listening. Morrison pulled the account. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Her voice carried a sharp edge. Because I'm starting to think you might have had something to do with his sudden concerns about office gossip. I sat down and picked up my wine glass, swirling the liquid thoughtfully. That's an interesting theory. How exactly would I influence a client I've never met? I don't know. But the timing is awfully convenient. Convenient how? Your affair with Evan becomes office gossip. Your biggest client gets nervous about drama affecting his project, and somehow, that's my fault. Rory's carefully composed mask slipped slightly. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? You sneak around for months, plan to leave me for your business partner, and expect everything to work out perfectly. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did it anyway. She took a large sip of wine. Things between us haven't been good for years, Tanner. We both know that. So you decided to fix the problem by having an affair? I decided to find someone who understood my ambitions, someone who wanted to build something bigger than a middle-class life in a middle-class house. Someone with money. Someone with vision. I laughed, and the sound seemed to surprise her. Evan Kellar has vision? The man who spent 20 minutes at his housewarming party explaining why his BMW was superior to every other car in the parking lot? You don't understand him. I understand him perfectly. He's a shallow, insecure man who uses expensive toys to convince people he's successful. And you fell for it. Rory's face flushed with anger. At least he has ambitions beyond fixing other people's computers. There it is, I said quietly. The real problem. You're embarrassed by what I do for a living. I'm not embarrassed. I'm just tired of limiting my dreams to match your limitations. I set down my wine glass and looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. The woman I'd married had been kind, funny, and supportive. This person sitting across from me was someone else entirely. You want to know something interesting about my job, Rory? When a system gets corrupted, sometimes you can clean it up and restore it to working order. But sometimes the corruption runs so deep that the only solution is to wipe everything clean and start over. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done trying to fix this marriage. You want Evan and his vision of success? You can have him. But you're not taking half of everything I've worked for in the process. Rory's eyes narrowed. That's not how divorce works in this state. Community property means I know exactly how divorce works in this state. I've spent the last month studying family law, asset division, and spousal support calculations. I've reviewed 15 years of financial records, tax returns, and bank statements. I've documented every major purchase, every investment, every debt we've incurred during our marriage. I pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table between us. I've also documented your affair. Text messages, credit card receipts showing dinners and hotel visits, witness statements about your behavior at office functions, everything admissible in court. Rory stared at the folder. You can't use that. There are privacy laws. Not for communications on devices I pay for, or credit cards in my name, or behavior witnessed in public places. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting my interests. There's a difference. She opened the folder and began flipping through pages of printed evidence. Her face grew paler with each document. This is crazy, Tanner. We can settle this like adults. We don't need to drag each other through court. You're absolutely right. We can settle this like adults. Here are my terms. I pulled out a second folder, this one containing a proposed settlement agreement I'd spent weeks crafting. You can have the house. It's underwater anyway, thanks to that refinancing you insisted on 2 years ago. I'll take my retirement accounts, my tools, and my truck. We split the credit card debt equally. No spousal support for either party. Rory scanned the document, her frown deepening. This is ridiculous. I'm entitled to half of everything, including your retirement savings. You're entitled to what the court decides you're entitled to. And courts in this state take adultery into account when dividing assets, especially when the adultery involved misuse of marital resources. What are you talking about? I reached across the table and flipped to a specific page in the evidence folder. Hotel receipts totaling $4,000 over 6 months. Restaurant bills averaging $300 per week. A weekend trip to Portland that you told me was a design conference, but was actually a romantic getaway. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Credit card records, hotel registration, even photos from Evan's social media accounts that he forgot to make private. Rory slumped back in her chair. What do you want? I want you to sign the settlement agreement. Tonight. And if I don't? Then we go to court, and I present all of this evidence to a judge, along with testimony about how your affair cost your firm its biggest client, how you've been lying to me for months, and how you've shown complete disregard for our marriage vows. You bastard. I'm the bastard? I'm not the one who spent 6 months sneaking around with my business partner. Rory stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to think about this. You have until tomorrow morning. If you don't sign by then, I'm filing for divorce and requesting a hearing on asset division. And Rory? She stopped at the kitchen doorway and turned back. I'm representing myself in court. I know you think I'm too poor to afford a good lawyer, but it turns out I don't need one. I just need to be prepared. After she left the room, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the evidence folders that represented the end of my marriage. I felt empty, but not sad. More like a computer after a complete system restore, clean, organized, and ready for a fresh start. My phone buzzed with a text from Donnie. How'd it go? Phase 2 complete, I replied. Preparing for Phase 3. Which is? Court day. Rory didn't sign the settlement agreement. Instead, she hired Davidson, Pierce & Associates, just as I'd predicted. Her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Davidson, filed a motion for temporary spousal support and an injunction preventing me from disposing of any marital assets. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 9 a.m. in Judge Whitcomb's courtroom. I spent the intervening days preparing like I was debugging the most complex network failure of my career. Every document indexed and cross-referenced. Every legal precedent researched and bookmarked. Every potential argument anticipated and countered. Donnie picked me up that morning in his cleanest work shirt and tie. My witness and moral support rolled into one. "You ready for this?" he asked as we walked up the courthouse steps. "I've been ready for weeks." Judge Whitcomb's courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly green. Rory sat at the plaintiff's table with Patricia Davidson, both women dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than I made in a month. When Rory saw me walk in carrying a single manila folder, she actually laughed. The sound echoed off the courtroom walls, drawing stares from the handful of observers in the gallery. "Your Honor," Davidson said during her opening statement, "my client is seeking reasonable temporary support while this matter is resolved. Mr. Jossman has frozen joint accounts and hidden assets in an attempt to force an unfair settlement." Judge Whitcomb, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, looked over her glasses at me. "Mr. Jossman, are you represented by counsel?" I stood up. "No, Your Honor, I'm representing myself." Rory leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, and both women smiled. The message was clear. They thought I was about to embarrass myself. "Very well," Judge Whitcomb said. "Please proceed with your response." I opened my folder and removed a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, I'm invoking statutory reimbursement for documented marital expenditures misrepresented during discovery pursuant to Family Code Section 1101. The courtroom went quiet. Davidson's smile faltered. "I'm submitting Exhibit A," I continued, handing a thick packet to the bailiff. "Indexed payments, sworn affidavits, and certified timelines, each cross-referenced to Mrs. Jossman's financial declarations, filed with this court." Judge Whitcomb accepted the exhibit and began reviewing the first few pages. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Davidson stood up. "Your Honor, opposing counsel, I mean Mr. Jossman, is clearly misunderstanding the applicable law. These documents appear to be irrelevant to the question of temporary support." "On the contrary," I said, "they're directly relevant to Mrs. Jossman's claims about our standard of living and her financial needs." I turned to face Rory. "Mrs. Jossman testified in her declaration that she requires $3,000 per month for basic living expenses. However, her credit card statements show that she spent an average of $4,000 per month over the past 6 months on restaurant meals, hotel stays, and luxury purchases." "Those were business expenses," Rory said quickly. "Were they?" I pulled out another document. "Because according to Exhibit B, which includes testimony from 3 employees at Romano's restaurant, you and Mr. Kellar had intimate dinners there twice weekly for 4 months. The server, Maria Santos, specifically recalls you holding hands and kissing." Davidson objected. "Hearsay, Your Honor." "Not hearsay if the witnesses are available for cross-examination," Judge Whitcomb said. "Are they, Mr. Jossman?" "Yes, Your Honor. They're all prepared to testify if needed." The judge continued reviewing my exhibits, comparing them to Rory's financial declarations. The longer she read, the more her frown deepened. "Mrs. Jossman," Judge Whitcomb said finally, "you declared under oath that you had no significant personal expenses outside of household necessities. How do you explain hotel charges totaling $4,800 over 4 months?" Rory looked at her lawyer, who whispered something urgent in her ear. "Your Honor," Davidson said, "my client may have inadvertently omitted some expenses from her initial declaration. We'd like to request a continuance to review." "No," Judge Whitcomb said firmly. "Mrs. Jossman signed this declaration under penalty of perjury. Either the expenses were business-related, as she claims, or they were personal expenses that she failed to disclose." I stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit C, which shows that Mrs. Jossman's alleged business expenses directly benefited her extramarital relationship with Evan Kellar, using funds from accounts that I contributed to as the primary income earner. Objection! Davidson stood up. Mr. Jossman is making inflammatory accusations. Based on documented evidence, I interrupted. Hotel receipts showing dual occupancy, restaurant bills for 2 people, and gift purchases charged to our joint credit card but given to Mr. Kellar. I handed another packet to the bailiff. Exhibit D includes photographs from Mr. Kellar's social media accounts showing him wearing a watch that Mrs. Jossman purchased with marital funds, as well as photos from their weekend trip to Portland. Judge Whitcomb examined the photographs, cross-referencing them with the credit card statements. The courtroom was silent, except for the rustle of papers. Mrs. Jossman, the judge said, did you use marital funds to purchase gifts for Mr. Kellar? Rory's face was flushed red. Those were business-related expenses. Client entertainment. A $1,500 watch is client entertainment? It was a business gift. To your business partner, with whom you were having an extramarital affair? Davidson tried to intervene. Your Honor, the nature of my client's relationship with Mr. Kellar is irrelevant to the question of temporary support. It's entirely relevant, Judge Whitcomb said sharply, when marital funds were used to support that relationship, while Mrs. Jossman was claiming financial hardship. I remained standing, folder in hand, letting the weight of evidence speak for itself. Your Honor, I said quietly, I'm requesting that the court compel clarification under oath regarding all expenditures listed in Exhibit E, and that Mrs. Jossman's request for temporary support be denied based on her misrepresentation of material facts. Judge Whitcomb spent several more minutes reviewing the documents, occasionally glancing up at Rory with an expression that could freeze water. Mrs. Jossman, she said finally, your financial declaration contains multiple false statements. You've claimed poverty while spending thousands of dollars on an extramarital affair. You've requested support based on expenses that were actually used to benefit another man. Your Honor, I can explain. You'll have an opportunity to explain at the final hearing. For now, I'm denying your request for temporary support and ordering you to provide a complete and accurate accounting of all expenditures over the past 12 months. She turned to me. Mr. Jossman, please submit your corrected asset ledger for the court record. I handed over my final exhibit, a comprehensive breakdown of our marital assets and debts, with detailed recommendations for division based on each party's contributions and misconduct. The court will review this ledger and schedule a final hearing within 30 days. Mrs. Jossman, you are warned against making any further false declarations. Such conduct could result in sanctions, including attorney fees and contempt charges. Judge Whitcomb's gavel came down with a sharp crack. As the courtroom emptied, Rory remained seated, staring at the table in front of her. Davidson was packing up her briefcase with quick, angry movements. Evan Kellar, who had been sitting in the gallery, approached Rory and put his hand on her shoulder. She shrugged him off violently. This is your fault, she hissed at him. If you hadn't been posting those stupid photos on social media. My fault? You're the one who lied on a court document. Their argument continued as they left the courtroom, their voices echoing down the hallway. I packed up my folder and walked out with Donnie, who had watched the entire proceeding with growing amazement. That was incredible, he said as we reached the courthouse steps. You completely destroyed her case. I just presented the facts in an organized manner. You made her lawyer look like an amateur. Davidson's not an amateur. She's just used to opponents who fight with emotion instead of evidence. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, again. This is Morrison. Heard about the court hearing, impressive work. Call me if you're ever interested in a career change. I showed the message to Donnie, who laughed. Looks like your reputation is spreading. Maybe, but I'm not done yet. What do you mean? You won. I looked back at the courthouse, where Rory and Evan were still arguing beside his repaired BMW. That was just the opening argument. The real victory comes at the final hearing. When's that? 3 weeks. And I guarantee you Rory's going to try something desperate before then. As we walked to Donnie's truck, I felt the same satisfaction I got from solving a particularly complex technical problem. Every variable accounted for, every outcome anticipated, every system running exactly as designed. The only question now was how far Rory would go to try to salvage her situation. But I was prepared for that too. After all, I'd been planning this for a very long time. The 3 weeks between hearings passed like a slow-motion car crash. Rory moved out of the house and into Evan's condo, but their relationship was deteriorating rapidly under the pressure of public scrutiny and financial stress. The Morrison account wasn't the only client Kellar and Associates lost. Word of the partners' affair and the messy court proceedings spread through the business community like a virus through an unprotected network. 3 more major clients pulled their contracts, citing concerns about the firm's stability. I monitored the situation from a distance, watching their world collapse with the same detached interest I'd observe a controlled demolition. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then, 2 days before the final hearing, Rory made her desperate play. I was working late in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Detective Ray Lyle standing on my front porch, his expression grim. "Mr. Jossman, I'm Detective Lyle with the city police. I'd like to ask you a few questions." I opened the door. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "We received a complaint alleging that you've been harassing your estranged wife and her business partner. Vandalism, stalking, that sort of thing." I invited him in and offered coffee, which he accepted. We sat in my living room while he pulled out a small notebook. "Can you tell me where you were last Tuesday evening between 8 and 10 p.m.? "I was here, working on some freelance projects. I have time-stamped files that can verify that." "What about the night of March 15th? That would be about 3 weeks ago." "I'd have to check my calendar, but I believe I was at McKenna's Auto Repair, helping my friend Donnie with some computer issues." Detective Lyle made notes. "Your wife claims that someone has been sabotaging her boyfriend's car, stealing her vehicle, and making threatening phone calls." "That sounds terrible. Have you found any evidence connecting me to these incidents?" "Not yet. But you have to understand, Mr. Jossman, divorce cases can get ugly. Sometimes people do things they wouldn't normally do." I nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine." "But detective, I'm a computer repair technician, not a criminal. My idea of revenge is leaving a 1-star Yelp review." Lyle smiled slightly. "Your wife seems to think you're more clever than that." "My wife thinks a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. She thought her affair was a secret, for example. You found out about that?" "Hard to miss when someone comes home at 3 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne." The detective studied my face. "How did that make you feel?" "Disappointed, angry, but not angry enough to start vandalizing cars or making threatening phone calls. I'm handling this through the legal system." "I heard you're representing yourself in court." "That's right. I've always been good at research and organization." Lyle closed his notebook. "Mr. Jossman, I'm going to be straight with you. Your wife is scared. She thinks you're planning something." "I am planning something. I'm planning to present evidence of her adultery and financial misconduct to a family court judge. Everything completely legal and above board." "And that's all?" "That's all." After the detective left, I called Donnie. "Rory sent the cops after me," I said. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I haven't done anything illegal." "Technically true. Completely true. We never broke any laws, Donnie. We just engaged in some creative problem solving." "Think they'll cause trouble for the hearing?" "No. Lyle's a good cop. He'll investigate properly, find no evidence of criminal activity, and file his report. If anything, this helps us." "How?" "Because it shows Rory's getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." The final hearing was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 a.m. I arrived early, carrying the same manila folder I'd brought to the first hearing, now supplemented with additional evidence I'd gathered over the past 3 weeks. Rory and Davidson were already there, along with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, expensive suit, the kind of confident bearing that screamed, "Expert witness." Judge Whitcomb called the session to order and reviewed the case file. "Mrs. Jossman, you've filed an amended financial declaration. Please explain the discrepancies from your original filing." Davidson stood up. "Your Honor, my client has discovered that her estranged husband has been engaging in a pattern of harassment and intimidation designed to coerce an unfair settlement." "What evidence do you have of this harassment?" "We have testimony that Mr. Jossman has been stalking Mrs. Jossman and Mr. Kellar, vandalizing their property, and making threatening communications." Judge Whitcomb looked at me. "Mr. Jossman?" I stood up calmly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Jossman filed a police complaint making these same allegations. Detective Ray Lyle conducted a thorough investigation and found no evidence to support any criminal charges." I handed a document to the bailiff. "This is Detective Lyle's official report, which concludes that there is no credible evidence linking me to any harassment or vandalism." Davidson looked surprised. She clearly hadn't expected me to have obtained the police report. "Furthermore," I continued, "I'd like to submit Exhibit F, which shows that Mrs. Jossman's amended financial declaration contains new false statements." "Objection!" Davidson stood up quickly. "Mr. Jossman is making accusations without foundation." "The foundation is in the exhibit, Your Honor. Mrs. Jossman now claims she needs $5,000 per month in support, but her actual expenses over the past 3 weeks have averaged less than $1,500. I handed over another packet of documents. "Hotel receipts show that she's been living rent-free at Mr. Kellar's condo. Restaurant charges have dropped to normal levels now that she's no longer entertaining her affair partner. Her actual cost of living is a fraction of what she's claiming." Judge Whitcomb reviewed the new evidence while Davidson whispered urgently with Rory. "Mrs. Jossman," the judge said, "your amended declaration states that you require additional support due to emotional distress and therapy costs. Do you have documentation of these expenses?" Rory looked at her expert witness, who nodded encouragingly. "Your Honor," Davidson said, "we'd like to call Dr. Marcus Webb to testify about the psychological impact of Mr. Jossman's harassment campaign." "Objection," I said. "Dr. Webb's testimony is based on Mrs. Jossman's unsubstantiated claims of harassment, which have already been investigated and dismissed by law enforcement." "Overruled. Dr. Webb, please take the stand." The expert witness was smooth and professional, testifying about trauma responses and the need for therapeutic intervention. He painted a picture of Rory as a victim of psychological warfare, driven to desperation by my calculated campaign of intimidation. It was an impressive performance, and I could see some sympathy in Judge Whitcomb's expression. When Davidson finished her questioning, the judge turned to me. "Cross-examination, Mr. Jossman?" I stood up with a single sheet of paper in my hand. "Dr. Webb, how many sessions have you had with Mrs. Jossman?" 3 sessions over the past 2 weeks. "And your fee for these sessions?" $500 per session. "So Mrs. Jossman paid you $1,500 for 3 sessions, then asked you to testify that she needs ongoing therapy at $500 per week?" Davidson objected, but Judge Whitcomb allowed the question. "The recommended treatment plan is based on clinical assessment," Dr. Webb said carefully. "Dr. Webb, are you aware that Mrs. Jossman spent over $4,000 per month on restaurant meals and hotel stays during her extramarital affair?" "I don't see how that's relevant." "Are you aware that she purchased luxury gifts for her affair partner using marital funds while claiming financial hardship?" "Mr. Jossman, I'm not here to judge Mrs. Jossman's past behavior. But you are here to recommend that I pay for therapy to help her cope with the consequences of that behavior?" Davidson was on her feet objecting, but the damage was done. Dr. Webb's credibility was shot, and everyone in the courtroom could see it. "No further questions," I said, sitting down. Judge Whitcomb called for a brief recess. When court resumed, her expression was stern. "I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today. Mrs. Jossman, your pattern of false declarations and misrepresented facts is deeply troubling. You've claimed harassment that police found baseless, expenses that are inflated or fabricated, and emotional distress that appears to be primarily related to the natural consequences of your own choices." She turned to me. "Mr. Jossman, your documentation is thorough, and your legal arguments are sound. I'm approving your proposed asset division with minor modifications." The gavel came down one final time. As the courtroom cleared, Rory sat in stunned silence. Evan, who had watched from the gallery, approached her cautiously. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means we're broke," she said quietly. "The firm's failing. I'm getting almost nothing from the divorce, and I still owe my lawyer $20,000. "We'll figure something out," Evan said, but his voice lacked conviction. I packed up my folder and walked toward the exit. As I passed their table, Rory looked up at me. "You planned all of this, didn't you? From the very beginning." I paused. I planned to protect myself from someone who was stealing from me and lying to me. Everything else was just natural consequences. "I never thought you were capable of something like this." "That was your first mistake." Outside the courthouse, Donnie was waiting by his truck, grinning broadly. "How'd it go?" "The ledger is balanced." "And how does that feel?" I thought about the question as we drove away from the courthouse. How did it feel to systematically dismantle someone's life using nothing but evidence, preparation, and their own poor choices? "It feels like justice," I said finally. "What's next?" "Next, I start over. Clean slate, fresh installation, all the bugs worked out." My phone buzzed with another text from Morrison. "Offer still stands. Could use someone with your skills." I showed the message to Donnie. "You thinking about it?" "Maybe. But first, I'm going to take a vacation. Somewhere warm, where the networks are simple and the problems are someone else's responsibility." As we drove through town, I caught a glimpse of Rory and Evan in his BMW, pulled over on the side of the road. Steam was rising from under the hood. Some problems, I reflected, have a way of solving themselves. The ledger was balanced, the system was clean, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow.